Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, a podcast about soundtracks, music, and movies. Each episode features a guest and focuses on a specific soundtrack and the personal stories connected to it. Now here's your host, Ryan Pack.
Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, the podcast where we talk to people about soundtracks that have impacted their lives. Today we are going to talk about the 1996 Danny Boyle film Trainspotting and its soundtrack, which spawned 2 volumes. We have returning guests today. We have both Nicole Barlow and Brandice Wilson, who you probably heard in episodes from the last month or so. So welcome back, Brandice and Nicole.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So glad to be back. So excited to talk to Brandice on this episode.
Same. I'm coming in prepared that I'm going to be heckled, so strap in because it's going to be a very rough ride.
It's kind of a heckling fest between Brandice and I, so I think we should apologize to Ryan in advance.
Yes, but also I want to get on the schedule for another one so that I have an opportunity to turn the tables on Nicole and heckle her in the future.
I just want to say this is the first time that Brandice has seen Trainspotting. So Brandice watched Trainspotting this morning prior to this recording. So everybody keep that in mind. She's a Trainspotting noob. I've seen this movie like 30 times.
Basically, Nicole watches it every weekend as sort of her like Sunday wind down versus I literally just finished it 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, Nicole puts Miles to bed and then she watches Trainspotting.
I do, I'll just whip up a hot cocoa, and I will it's the comfort blanket. I'll just put on Trainspotting. It's that soothing to me.
Didn't you say you had a dog? What was this dog's name?
Yeah, so the first dog that I ever adopted as an adult was this little scruffy terrier that I got from the Riverside Shelter and that came from evidence impound. Like, his owners got locked up on drug offenses, which is
ironic.
And I named him Renton. I named him after Ewen McGregor's character in this movie because I thought, like, I'm going to make you choose life, little dog.
And was this before or after you realized you were obsessed?
I mean, this is probably like during the height of my obsession with this film and this film's soundtrack. So, but yeah, just to tell you like where my relationship is with this movie, I named my dog after the main character. Brandon's relationship with this movie is I just saw this movie this morning.
You have an addiction to a movie about addictions. Let's just leave it at that.
The irony is not lost.
So Brandice is a little bit younger than Nicole and I. So when Nicole and I were in college, I feel like this is one of those movies that you could find in every dorm in America, along with like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Requiem for a Dream and like Boondock Saints and Fight Club. I think those were like the big 5. Like some guy had all 5 of those movies in every dorm in America. So Brandice is a little bit younger, so I think that's part of why she hasn't seen it, I guess.
Yes and no. I mean, like you guys, when I was in college, Requiem for a Dream, Dazed and Confused, Fight Club, all of these movies were also like in every single dorm. And I have also seen all of those movies like in college. I've even seen SLC Punk like in college. Somehow this one just sort of like missed the boat. But I feel like maybe part of the problem was, and part of the problem like right now, is my tolerance for like burnout nihilistic movies sort of peaked in college. So after watching like a few, then I was like, I'm good. I'm cool. I'm like done with this genre.
Well, thankfully, my development is completely arrested and I still love this movie because I am 19 and I just want to be like eating some hot Cheetos and watching this film high on a couch.
Okay, I really don't know how you can eat anything while watching this movie. Nicole, would you like to pick up this part of the discussion with the live text that I sent you while watching it for the first time?
All right, let me give everyone a dramatic reading of the live text that I received this morning while Brandice was trying to watch this film. Oh God, I was not prepared for this movie. Why are you making me watch this? OMG, no. No.
That was for the worst toilet in Scotland scene.
which Brandice had never seen before or even heard about.
This is what's amazing to me. It's not that the movie skipped you. I get that you never had like a boyfriend subject you to Trainspotting. You never had like a weird friend like me that was like, hey, you should really watch this movie. It contains nothing but heroin and grossness. Please laugh at this with me. I get that. But what I don't get is that like you've never had any awareness. You had zero foreknowledge of the toilet scene, the baby scene, none of it.
See, I wasn't really bothered by the baby scene. It was literally just the toilet scene and the dirty sheets scene. Blood, guts, anything weird, gross, disturbing. Nothing else bothers me except for human excrement that's not blood. So basically shit and vomit. I'm like, nope, I'm out.
Shit and vomit. So you told me via text, you're like, I am fast forwarding through the toilet scene. Did you literally skip, like, as soon as he slides down the bowl? Did you
Actually, before that. So like, yeah. So like I skipped through him like having the squirts in the toilet because I saw this as soon as he like entered into the toilet, like the actual physical toilet like room. I was like, oh my God, this is so disgusting. Skip, skip, skip. He's on the toilet. I'm like, still skip, skip, skip. And then I see him like reaching into the toilet and I was like, oh my God, no. Like, you know you've hit rock bottom when you're reaching into your own diarrhea to get your like methadone suppositories or heroin suppositories or like whatever they were. So and then I saw he was like in the water. I got like the whole metaphor thing or whatever, but I was like, nope, still don't even need to see the diving into clear water either.
My favorite part about that scene though is that it's all soundtracked to that like lovely like Brian Eno like Bright Blue Day song, and he just slides down the toilet like this beautiful like river otter, and then he ends up like in this clear water with that plate and like pulling out the puffed up suppositories. Like it's completely fucked up, but it's also like really surreal and weird and awesome. And I think at that point I was like, I've never seen anything like this. This is disgusting and odd, and I fucking love it. It was so cool.
I appreciate the surreal oddness of it. Huge Deli fan, so like kudos to that. But I can't get past the fact that it was in a toilet. Just can't.
There is a lot of shit in this movie, and I think if I had known that your trigger was diarrhea, that I wouldn't have told you to do this podcast with me.
Yeah, if that first scene wasn't bad enough, then we would follow it up with the dirty sheets scene. And I think that's when I texted you the rest of it.
Did you get to see the dirty sheets get flung across the breakfast table, or did you not make it?
I was like watching, and then like as soon as they like I saw that they were going to be flung, I shut my eyes. Because I knew that trying to hit the skip button would not be a fast enough reaction.
Like, I'm not going to beat this diarrhea to the breakfast table. So
Nope. So the thought of you eating Cheetos while watching this movie is totally mind-boggling to me.
Oh yeah, I'm completely desensitized to every scene in this film.
What about Ewen McGregor being that skinny? Apart from those scenes, I was also like, Ewen McGregor, please put a shirt on. You're way too disturbingly skinny.
I mean, again, here's where we're at opposite ends of the spectrum, because as a person in my 20s, I thought that was just like the height of hotness. I'm like, yes, if you look like you're dying from like an old-timey disease, I want a piece of that.
I was so grossed out.
I just thought that like he was like the hottest thing in that movie, like despite the disgusting, horrible, life-threatening heroin addiction. Yeah, that club scene like really does it for me.
The club scene was the worst with like those cap sleeves and his little skinny arms. I was like, no, make it stop.
Yeah, I love it. He could have lost 20 more pounds with the machinist.
No.
So the movie did launch Ewan McGregor's career. It also launched Danny Boyle's career, who directed the film.
Yeah.
Danny Boyle has had a very strange career, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was looking at his filmography, and it's kind of all over the place, which I love. He clearly has a ton of range.
Yeah, he was also the artistic director of the opening ceremonies of the 2012 London Olympics.
What? That's what I love about this podcast, that Ryan will pull out some obscure fact about the people involved in the movie, and then it'll send you like in a spiral for the rest of the day, like questioning everything you've ever seen or known.
Did either of you guys watch the opening ceremonies from the London Games?
No.
Maybe.
So I think I was out with a couple friends, and we were eating dinner, and it was on, and I knew Danny Boyle was the artistic director behind it, so I was kind of curious. And it's like a story about the Industrial Revolution, and Kenneth Branagh shows up. But then, so it was like a really weird story, which, you know, I don't know how to like set up a opening ceremonies for the Olympics. I'm not going to place any blame there, but after at one point during the ceremony, after this story is told, I think they were they did like a montage of like things that like entertainment wise, they were basically trying to show what the UK has exported into the world. And so they did a section on cinema, and Danny Boyle put Trainspotting in as one of the great exports. And I was like, are you allowed to do that if you're the artistic director, to put your own stuff in there?
That's incredible. I almost respect it because it's such a bullshit move. Like, it's just such a fucking fuck you. What part of Trainspotting, out of curiosity, like, how do you work that into something like an opening ceremony? Was it the toilet scene?
If only.
Was it a float?
Projected onto Big Ben.
You know, while countries are walking in, like they have like different like bands and stuff playing in this big stadium. And the only one I specifically remember was, oh my God, they got Dizzy Rascal to perform at the Olympic Games. I was like, I mean, like 2003 me was very excited. I was like, oh, it's Dizzy Rascal. Like, look, he's getting all this exposure. But it was also, he was performing like his worst song. But it was fun to hear like NBC commentators be like, Dizzy Rascal, grime rapper from the UK.
Right.
And then like explaining like his heritage. I was like, wow, this is like super surreal. And only Danny Boyle could have put that together.
It sounds like he put it together last minute, like it was a bad group project gone wrong.
I think he spent too much time on telling the story of the Industrial Revolution in England.
Were there moths involved? Like, please tell me that they were like white moths that died.
No, but there were like, I don't know, those factory things. those big factories are what made the Olympic rings at one point.
What? Like smokestacks?
Uh-huh.
What? That's here's some smokestacks blowing like dirty, gross pollution that everybody's gonna think is fog. So I kind of halfway remember, maybe you can verify this, that somewhere in this presentation they also trotted out like Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell. Not real, like that they just kind of released them. Like, look, we also have models.
Like dubs. They released
Release Kate Moss.
It was probably between the smokestacks and Dizzy Rascal. And then showing that Trainspotting was the greatest movie ever.
Well, now I know that Seth MacFarlane at some point has to have parodied this and had made like Kate Moss as a giant like Macy's Day Parade blimp. Released her up into the sky. Release Kate Moss. That's like totally a Seth MacFarlane thing.
This whole thing is more train wreck than Trainspotting, right? Am I right?
Yes.
So I know how much you loathed this movie and all of its like shit associated scenes, but when you watch, okay, the opening scene with the Choose Life monologue, and they're all like running down the street, did that not hook you? Like that doesn't do anything for you? Because that scene, like I was all in.
Yeah, I had that monologue in poster form in my room in college.
There you see?
No, it totally did. It totally hooked me, and I felt like suckered in with that because for me, that opening monologue was like very similar to Fight Club, and I actually really, 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 really loved Fight Club, and it was just like very similar to the whole like IKEA catalog. Ironically, while he's sitting on the toilet, monologue from there, and so I thought that it was going to be a little bit more down that alley, and it definitely was not. So I feel like that was a bit of a bait and switch.
So the movie just needed more punching, less feces.
Yeah, pretty much.
A lot of parallels. I think the reason why it did it for so many people is the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack is part of what makes it iconic for a lot of the people that love it. Like that whole running scene is set to Lust for Life, and with all apologies to Carnival Cruise Lines, Like, I cannot think of a better North Star for this movie than Lust for Life. Like, that song is just like pure adrenaline. Like, that's a launch point for a movie, is like an amazing monologue. It's a really well written monologue. That song, like, all in. You get to meet like all the characters. Great. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they brought it. I didn't watch the second movie, but I hear that they brought it back, but remixed by The Prodigy. So clearly, Danny Boyle wanted to use that song to kind of link the two movies.
That makes sense. I have seen the second movie, but if you asked me to tell you about it, I don't think that I really could, except that they're old. They're old in the second movie, what I remember. It was my favorite.
I think that's very telling. You can give like a play-by-play description of the first movie and you can't pick out one scene from the second, I think is a very strong critique of the second movie.
Yeah, I guess that's the only critique that you need, is like, it wasn't memorable.
Pretty much.
Sorry, Danny Boyle, it wasn't that memorable.
No, I guess for me, like in the first one, like I said, really loved Fight Club. I even really loved Requiem for a Dream, even though like I know it's harder to watch to me. I feel like I just was able to dig into those more. And I know that a lot of people feel differently about this one being a little bit more, I guess, quote unquote, relatable for them and like a little bit more flippant. But I guess it was less relatable for me, just because it was a bit more flippant. But on the opposite of that, I did really love the soundtrack too. I did really appreciate the music. It was very well set in the moment and it set the feeling and sort of the tone for the film. And I just like really loved all the songs that it pulled. I don't think, because I was listening for it for the soundtrack too, specifically, obviously, to do this podcast. And I don't think there was a single song where I felt like, oh, this is like a miss. I think it was very well put together.
Also, I just want to clarify that I do not identify with Trainspotting. I am neither Scottish nor a recovering or current heroin addict. I feel like people should know that about me now that I've outed myself as like a super fan that named my dog after the lead character in this film. I'm okay. Everything's fine. There are no needles in my arm at the time of this recording. Like, we're good.
But I can see how other people have that like teenage angst sort of like, you know, like screw the system sort of thing that like helps them dig in. I know that that was a really big thing in Fight Club too, and I actually didn't dig into that part of that movie. I think I just really loved sort of the drama and the twist in it. But yeah, that's just the Burnout movies just never really hooked me.
It sounds like at least the parts of the film though that like that are kind of like weird and messed up, like the OD scene, like when he ODs and the carpet like folds around him and he drops through the floor like a casket, and then there's that like weird camera angle that's like just kind of like a GoPro strapped to his face, and it's all scored to like Perfect Day by Lou Reed.
Oh yeah, like the surreal moments. I loved that. I loved that it was odd. The cinematography and the coloring, like all of that was great. Like I said, the soundtrack obviously great. I loved that when he OD'd that they did that camera movement where he's like literally 6 feet under, so you know like immediately like what's happening. I thought like from an like artistic standpoint, I thought the movie was extremely well done. It's literally just not my genre.
Yeah, so I think at the time it was really breakthrough also because nobody had really tried anything like that. Like the mix of tones and the weird cinematography choices, the soundtrack choices, which for 1996 were like the height of being cool, right? It's like Britpop, electronica, heroin. Like the movie could not be more 90s.
Yeah, it was definitely did an amazing job at capturing a moment in time and also geography. It felt very like Scottish in the 90s. What was a little bit weird to me is I never really saw like, I watch a lot of like British TV and film, and I have never really gotten that sort of a snapshot of London for the period of the movie where they're in London. It felt very like a weird take on London to me, which was interesting. So I appreciated that. I definitely loved sort of like the time capsuleness of it. I think, like I said, artistically loved it. Genre-wise, hate, still reeling from those few scenes.
Yeah, the timing of this movie, I think, is perfect. So it's, a 1996 film. Kurt Cobain Kurt Cobain died 2 years previously, so music in general is kind of changing. So a lot of Britpop didn't make it over to the States successfully outside of like Oasis at this point in time. And I think a big reason for that is because most Americans like myself were recovering from grunge. We didn't know what to do. We were looking for more, crunchy guitars. And, Blur's Park Life was like the opposite of that, even though it's an album I love now. And I think right around 1996 is when I could finally start kind of moving in that direction. So when the soundtrack came out and it had songs like Lust for Life, Iggy Pop, and it had, Lou Reed, it kind of helped me transition my musical tastes a little bit. Also, I think the Universal from The Great Escape by Blur was also like one of the first Blur songs that I really got into. But, it like 1996 was like a lot of transitions. And I think this movie coming out at that time, it kind of was like a lightning in a bottle sort of moment.
Yes, I felt that way too. Like, I felt like it really matured my musical sensibilities, and it opened like new pathways to things that I was curious about, and didn't, kind of like drugs. It was a gateway drug. And now
To music.
I'm straight on that musical heroin. It was, but really, like, it was kind of like a bridge, right? And like Brandice said, it's such this like slice of life and moment in time, and all that Britpop stuff that maybe wasn't cool stateside, like suddenly became really interesting and cool, and we might have caught on to it a little later than people in the UK. But yeah, like the inclusion of like Damon Albarn and Pulp, so great. Can I hit you, Ryan, with my favorite fun fact from this film? It's about Britpop.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to hit you with this. You probably already know because you always have like the best research. But apparently Oasis was supposed to be on this soundtrack, but Noel Gallagher turned it down. He turned it down because he thought it was a movie about trains.
God, no.
This is a true story. Like, Noel literally thought it was about like train aficionados, like people that made like model trains or something, and he turned them down. And then he saw the movie later and he was like, oh, I didn't know, that was actually pretty great. Sorry.
Well, that's embarrassing.
That's quite the twist. I thought it was going to be like he didn't want to be on the soundtrack because Damon was writing a original song for him. Blur was going to be on it. I thought it was kind of one of those rivalry things, but it just ended up being like, oh, he thought it was just a movie about trains, so he didn't want to do it.
That's so good. Ironically, unlike you guys with like identifying with this moment in time, obviously since it's slightly before my time, I can't identify in that note. But because I didn't have this whole like post-grunge thing, and grunge was like never my scene, no offense to Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, I think they're totally great, but also just not my cup of tea. I was much more of like wearing the black leather 9 Inch Nails side of things, just many years after that was actually a moment in time. So for me, like Britpop is like much more of like a natural transition from like industrial anyway. So it's not that weird of like a transition from like grunge to Britpop. It's more for me is like, well, yeah, that's like the natural progression of things. So hearing you guys talking about how like, oh, like in a post grunge thing, it wasn't really cool. So you had to like kind of like ease into it, like is totally bonkers and like weird and like foreign to me. To me, it's like, well, yeah, like 9 Inch Nails, Britpop, like Oasis, like it's all the same thing.
I like how Brandice is just way more continental than she's just like wearing her leather jacket.
Well, I mean, again, like many years after the fact, so I have like 2020 hindsight, but I'm just saying, like, it's weird to me hearing that Britpop was not cool because by the time that I was old enough to really discover Britpop, it had already been cool. So, like, I missed the boat on this whole like having to ramp up to Britpop thing.
Yeah, I think in the 90s it was complicated, right? Because I remember having some pretty pedestrian musical tastes that I can blame directly on like just what was mainstream popular. Because I think for Ryan and I, like, grunge happened, Kurt died, we were pretty young still, like maybe like preteens, junior high, right? And then all of that like post-grunge kind of stuff started coming out. So like I was listening to Bush, I was listening to Loud, but like these are not cool bands, right? But that's the springboard to stuff that was like more interesting. Like those were my high school jams. But then this movie came out and it was like, oh, maybe this stuff is actually my jam. Like this is actually very cool.
Yeah, we went from Nirvana writing I hate myself and I want to die to Blur singing about like these fictional characters that Damon Albarn created. You know? Like Girls and Boys is like the big single from Parklife, and it's almost like a disco song.
Yeah, it's a single thing. It's a singles problem too, because I think what got exported immediately was stuff that kind of would turn you off. You weren't really into like pop music. If you weren't into things that were, you know, a little bit more lighthearted.
Like Blur literally had the Pet Shop Boys remix Girls and Boys. You know, like it's that far removed from grunge.
It is a few shades away.
I think that's why Oasis was able to make the transition, because those first two albums have like these walls of like crunchy guitars, and also Wonderwall.
Also Wonderwall. Also Champagne Supernova. You know.
But you know, it's closer to like American grunge rock than, you know, anything off of Parklife.
Yeah, it's like so guitar forward. Yeah, no, you're right.
One line, and it's actually like really ironic that you guys were talking about how like grunge was dead, and you guys, this movie helped you accept sort of Britpop into your lives, because one of my favorite parts was when in the film was when Kelly MacDonald called Iggy Pop Ziggy Pop and thought he was dead and saying like, you need to find like new music, you need to like find new things.
She's you.
So like in the moment that you guys were discovering Britpop, this movie is saying that Britpop is dead.
Well, I don't know. Like, I think I'm going back to that scene too, where they're like snipering in the park, and Johnny Lee Miller has his whole theory of life and everything speech, where he's talking about how like you have it and then you lose it. And he's like using Iggy Pop as everybody like as this example, right? Like at one point you've got it and then it's gone, right? So I do feel like that's kind of a theme throughout the movie is like, are you going to grow up at some point? Are you going to move past like all of your obsessions and, you know, be a respectable person and move to London, go into leisure industry?
There were some great comedic moments. Like, again, the whole Ziggy Pop. Now I'm just going to call him Ziggy Pop. And then that scene with the rifle, like the BB gun in the park. And then also when he said that, like, it's my pleasure to give other people leisure, like in the job interview, was really great.
The job interview scene is so good.
It was so uncomfortable.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so great. Spud is a great character. Another fun fact about the guy who plays Spud, whose name is also Ewen, he played Ewan's character Renton in like the London production of Trainspotting. So this was on stage for a while, and so I guess he played the lead. And then when they got around to making the movie, they're like, actually, we see you as Spud, and we've always seen you as Renton, so you're going to have to deal with this.
Well, that's a little insulting.
But he's so good at Spud, like it kind of couldn't work any other way. Like he really, for all of the like poop flinging, he's really good in that role.
Yeah, no, he's really great. I think the casting was really amazing in that respect. Apart from Ewen McGregor could have had 10 more pounds.
I mean, I disagree strongly with that statement. Push him over with a feather. Put a tank top on that.
I also recognized Begbie and Tommy. Like in the film, I knew them, but I couldn't really place them. So it wasn't until later and I looked it up and I was like, oh my God, how did I not know that? But I recognized Kelly MacDonald like instantly. And I'm so surprised that she hasn't blown up more. Like you said, Ewan McGregor like took off, Danny Boyle took off, but then like Kelly MacDonald is a total gem. And I feel like she hasn't gotten nearly enough work in the US.
What else has she been in that you recognize her from? Because I know I recognize her in other things too, and I can't place it now.
She was in Boardwalk Empire, across from, she played like the love interest of Steve Buscemi. And then she was the voice in Brave. And then also she played a character in Harry Potter. Those are the things that I know her from, but like I know she's done a lot of other really great stuff too. I just haven't seen it.
I went to Edinburgh in like the mid 2000s, and I've been to a Scottish club, and I think I expected like I'm gonna walk in and it's gonna be like the same music, and it's gonna be like the Milk Bar from Clockwork Orange on the walls, and like everybody's gonna be doing heroin. It wasn't really like that, just for the record. It was much less heroin-y than I expected. Still fun. They played Grievous in the Heart for me. And I never really felt like such a good dancer as I did around Scottish people who were, really, they were not doing it.
Shade.
I forget where I read this. I read somewhere that they mentioned that the 70s songs that are featured on the soundtrack are all there because they all have to do with drugs and they there's no relation to the fact that, Lou Reed and Iggy Pop and Brian Eno are just great artists that all make sense on the soundtrack.
I think that makes sense. I mean, Iggy really is the North Star for this movie, right? Because nightclubbing is in this movie too. In like a really pivotal moment when things are getting dark, right? And that is kind of like the whole trajectory. That's the whole story of Iggy Pop is horrible heroin addict, gets pulled out of it by David Bowie. Like there is definitely that element. I don't know if you could say that about Eno. I don't know what Eno was doing drug-wise.
Yeah, I don't think of like heavy drug use when I think of Eno. Like I'm sure he did some stuff, but
no, I think of like heavy eyeliner use. I don't necessarily think of heavy drug use.
Addictions come in all forms.
Maybe he was just more low key about it. There is
like I know Velvet Underground has a song called Heroin.
a little on the nose.
Just a little.
But that's not it. But it's Perfect Day by Lou Reed. It's not Velvet Underground. I don't know. I just thought it was weird for them to be like, oh, yeah, these are 70 songs on the soundtrack because they all have to do with drugs and not like, oh, Iggy Pop is just kind of. I mean, Iggy Pop is perfect for this movie, right? Like, other than if you were to make a, biopic about him.
Right. Well, if you ever want to do Velvet Goldmine as an episode, that's about the closest movie you're going to get to a biopic of Iggy and Bowie. But I digress.
And is it biopic or is it biopic?
Biopic.
I thought it was biopic.
I thought it was.
It's biopic, probably. This is like the Capri Sun question. Is it Capri Sun? Is it Capri Sun?
It's definitely Capri Sun.
I think I called it Capri Sun from most of my
Yeah,
life.
I don't remember a Capri Sun controversy.
This is a me problem, isn't it? This is what I'm starting to understand.
Oh, it's like that controversy about the Capri Sun, right, guys?
Nope.
Just trying to slip that in there like it's a real thing.
Shut down so fast.
I really thought that you guys were going to back me up. I should know better.
It looks like Danny Boyle did the music video for Lust for Life too.
What?
Looks like it.
Probably not when the song was originally released.
It's no, it says 1996. I think maybe it was like for like a promo for Trainspotting.
I will have to watch that when this is over because I want to know what that is.
They might have like actually like pulled scenes from the movie maybe to make part of that music video. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I just noticed that was on the list.
We recently did an episode for the podcast of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And that movie is really hard to describe to someone who's never seen the movie.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that.
It's like, here's this movie set in the Great Depression that's kind of about the Odyssey, but they also write a song that gets popular, and George Clooney is obsessed with his pomade. No.
There's like a lot of prerequisite knowledge. It's like you got to come as like an English major, and like, you have to already be in to win with the Coen brothers and all their shit.
Like, there's a Ku Klux Klan rally that's hilarious.
It's kind of the same with Trainspotting right now, where like I'm trying to describe elements of this movie without making myself sound like a person with the most fucked up priorities. It's like, it's such a good scene when he's dying of that overdose on the screen.
Yeah, like it's not a movie that necessarily glorifies heroin, though there's a lot of really cool scenes that have to do with heroin.
Right.
Oh no, I definitely feel like my strong vibes were those like really over melodramatic movies that they make you watch in high school to scare you straight off of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's straight up what this movie felt like, was like every 5 minutes, reason number 457 to not do drugs.
I mean, someone does die of AIDS, and there is like a neglected and then dead baby. So I would
And
say
also
that,
reaching into a toilet for your suppositories because you're that desperate. Yeah, lots of reasons.
I would say ultimately it falls down on the side of maybe don't do this.
I think it falls strongly on the side of don't do drugs.
I'm still trying to process the fact that Brandice went to a high school that outlawed rock and roll.
What's that? Footloose High School.
Oh yeah, we didn't watch Footloose because we thought it was real life.
I mean, you are from Texas.
I am not.
I
am from here. Here is California, but I lived in Texas. Clear distinction.
Right. It's very clear. Right. You went to high school in Texas.
I went to high school in Texas. Dancing wasn't exactly outlawed. Rock and roll wasn't exactly outlawed, but it might as well have been.
It was strongly discouraged.
Very strongly discouraged. We did not have a health class because that would be going into too many gruesome details. So movies like this were our scared straight, like the only education we got on like drugs, safe sex, et cetera, et cetera. And safe sex was don't do sex.
I'd love to go to the Texas high school that shows Trainspotting as part of its health program.
Well, they would have had to bleep out like 98% of the words, but...
Yeah, I think because I went to school in California, I feel like I got like a Dare t-shirt that you cut off into a midriff tee and then afterwards watch Trainspotting. Yeah, and like lit up in the park. That's the trajectory.
I think too why it reminded me of that.
The park across the street from the Nixon Library.
Yeah, because I'm from Melinda, so like I'm trying to make myself sound like I'm all edgy, but really I'm from like the most conservative, most suburban corner of Orange County, which is almost Texas, if you really think about it.
I was also reading like an article about the color theory that like went into Trainspotting too, which like I said, I noticed the cinematography immediately, and I noticed that a lot of work went into the color grading. But I didn't really think so much about like the color theory until afterwards, with like all of the like really bad, like depressing, like hardcore drug scenes were all in red. And then like all of the safe, heartwarming scenes were in green. And then like the transition in between scenes were in blue. I didn't catch that while watching. I was paying attention to a lot of other stuff, including the music, but I appreciate like color theory that goes into movies. And I think there was a lot of detail that went into the.
So Brandice, are there any songs on the soundtrack that you ended up, are there any songs on the soundtrack that you like, that you discovered through this movie?
All of them. I actually really enjoy Britpop. It's not necessarily something I listen to like all the time by any means, but I loved all those songs. I have absolutely no complaints with the soundtrack or any of the songs on the movie.
I think we should have just given you the soundtrack and then had you fill in the blanks. Like, what do you think is happening when this song is playing?
That's also a great idea, is you listen to the soundtrack like in order, and then you have to describe what you think is happening during the songs.
Like, I'm pretty confident that if you made a guess and then we showed you the scene, you would be very wrong and very surprised.
Oh, absolutely. I never would have guessed a guy climbing into his own diarrhea to get his own suppositories, obviously. Who would?
That's going to be the Brian Eno song for sure.
Right? That's totally going to be the Brian Eno song when that's happening. I think that's why I love it so much. That it's wildly inventive. Like, it was very, very inventive for its time, and I think it holds up in terms of the creative choices that are made. Even if they gross you out, they're still pretty great.
Yeah, no, it totally holds up. Like, in no way does it feel like outdated or like it's been surpassed currently. I think it definitely like stands the test of time for sure.
So did either of you guys listen to the second Trainspotting soundtrack? Not for the second movie, but they ended up releasing 2 volumes of the Trainspotting soundtrack in 96 and 97.
Well, somewhere in this collection of vinyl I have that version of it, and I am struggling to remember everything that's on it. You have a track list, though?
Wait, do you have both versions on vinyl or just the second version?
It's entirely possible that I have multiple versions, but I don't know right now because my husband is he's kind of the keeper of the Discogs and the lists of things that we have, and I just like ask for stuff like I'm at the library.
Do you have a card? Is there like a checkout system?
Yeah, there's like a punch card, and I'm like, hey, I'd like to check out the Trainspotting reissue, please. Yeah.
And he's like, you haven't returned your last 3 vinyls. Why should I give you this one right now?
Be surprised. He's like, can you turn in the ones that are already in a stack over there? Okay. Yeah, so that's how it works. So I'm not totally sure, but I would love to know more about this.
It has The Passenger by Iggy Pop.
Yes.
It's got Golden Years by Bowie, Nightclubbing Baby Doc remix. It's got some Joy Division. Do any of these ring a bell? I know you know the Iggy Pop and David Bowie songs on their own.
I'm laughing at the what was it? Baby Socks?
Baby Doc.
Baby, I don't feel like babies should be anywhere near this.
I'm just reading the track listing. It has a artist called PF Project featuring Ewen McGregor, and the title is Choose Life, which I assume is just like the monologue remix.
It is, yeah. I remember this now. And that, yes, you are exactly right. It's Ewen McGregor, the P.F. Chang's remix or whatever. It's just the monologue.
The P.F. Chang's remix?
What did you say? P.F. what?
PF Project.
Same thing. It's totally the same thing.
Thanks. Choose Life.
Yeah, so the soundtrack came out on Capitol Records, and around this time they were a big fan of doing these like second volumes of successful soundtracks. They also did it with Romeo and Juliet.
I do appreciate this expanded secondary soundtrack, which I'm now like vaguely recollecting, because I don't think any of those songs are anywhere near the actual film soundtrack. They're just like
yeah, I think they're like songs that were like cut from the movie, or songs that Danny Boyle was like listening to while filming the movie.
I mean, it's just kind of a stretch, right? Because there's a lot of adjacent music that it kind of like violates the whole pact of like a soundtrack, right? Like a soundtrack is supposed to, correlate to scenes from the movie and then like bring you back to things that you liked about the film. It's supposed to follow like that logic. So I always find these like bonus soundtracks kind of weird because they can be anything. Like they're not related to the movie in that way.
Or the soundtracks that say that songs from and inspired by the movie.
Inspired by, that's what it is. I'm like picturing that on a CD jewel case right now.
It's basically just like more of the same playlist.
If you liked this, you're gonna love this.
Like, I'm a big fan of the Black Panther soundtrack, but I believe like 4 songs out of like 15 are actually in the movie.
Right. Well, because most movies, I don't want to say most movies, but I think a lot of movies that are more mainstream, more like blockbuster movies, they've got like a couple of core tracks and then a bunch of things that are filled in.
Mm-hmm. Or like mostly original score, and then there's like a few songs in there, and then they're like, oh, let's do a soundtrack. Oh, wait, it was a lot of original scores. Now we have to like beef it up a little bit.
We got to pad this so that people will actually buy it.
I guess, yeah.
That used to be a thing. Nobody buys music anymore, so I don't know the logic now.
I think soundtracks are kind of starting to come back with like the success of like Guardians of the Galaxy.
That makes sense.
Or in the form of literally a mixtape, since, cassette tapes had their moment again.
See, I feel like
they're coming back.
Like they're mixtapes, right? And so Guardians of the Galaxy took that literally. But like Trainspotting to me has always been like, that's a really good mixtape. Like, you can listen to that soundtrack independent of seeing the movie, and you'll be pretty happy with that playthrough. Like, it's
And in Brandice's case, she would be much happier if that was.
Yes. Much happier. If you had started me on just the soundtrack, I would have been like, oh my God, I'm going to love this movie. I love this soundtrack. It can only be good things.
I wonder if you had listened to the soundtrack extensively beforehand, if you would feel differently about the movie, or if the movie would be even more disappointing by comparison.
I think it would be more disappointing. I think I would feel like even more like misled and more of a bait and switch. Because like I said, those first few moments, like with that monologue in the opening scene, I was definitely feeling Fight Club vibes. And then it took a hard left into Requiem for a Dream, but not Requiem for a Dream.
From Fight Club to Nightclub.
From Fight Club to Requiem for a Dream with diarrhea.
Requiem for a diarrhea.
Yeah, so I think if I had like enjoyed the soundtrack thoroughly for quite some time before watching the film, I would feel very betrayed.
Betrayed. Wrong language. Oh God.
Nicole is seething. She's so angry.
I know.
I'm telling you, like, I told Brandice via text, I'm like, I guess this is the payback for Pentatonics. I think we're finally full circle.
Again, for the record, that was an accident.
Okay, Ryan.
I was subjecting myself to a cappella as well.
Oh, I remember that. I don't know why you texted me, but Nicole texted me, hey, I'm with Brandice and Debbie, and it's 4th of July fireworks at the bowl. And then I think in all caps, I replied, are you watching Pentatonics? And then she was like, God damn it, how did you know?
I just want to say, to clear this up once and for all, I really thought Pentatonics was going to perform the national anthem and then be gone, and then we'd see fireworks, and that would be the night. But no, Pentatonics came out and butchered a full set of songs that I like. Like, they were out there butchering, like, Queen songs, butchering everything. I think I blocked it out. I think I blocked most of it out. Like, Brandice is going to block out most of Trainspotting.
I had no idea that they were performing. I didn't read past Hollywood Bowl and fireworks, and I was like, sign me up. I had no idea that there was going to be a cappella, and I apologize sincerely.
I mean, it wasn't just a cappella, it was extended a cappella, and it was a cappella surrounded by like a bunch of high school thespian drama kids that were so into it. Like,
and Debbie.
And Debbie, and our friend Debbie. We were just flanked by people that are like, this is great.
Yes. That was rough.
People had Pentatonics t-shirts. I
did not know she was a fan.
We did not either.
Yeah, there was new information. I think we would have reconsidered some things.
Well, that's why Debbie's not on the podcast.
Kidding. We love Debbie, even if she likes a cappella. We accept all types.
I'm staying silent.
It was like, well, that's an awkward silence. How do I fill this?
Well, I'm glad we finally got that out there.
Feels good.
And then I guess I should follow with the obligatory. You guys made it to Pentatonics, but you guys couldn't make it to Nile Rodgers.
We did not know that they were going to be performing until they were already on stage and it was too late to leave. It was a very rough night. We've blocked it out. It's done. It's in the past.
I'm glad we finally got to have our Pentatonics intervention.
Water under the bridge over troubled water, which I'm pretty sure they also ruined that night.
Well, thank you, Nicole and Brandice, for coming back to the podcast.
Thanks, Ryan. This was fun, and I'm not as offended by scenes that have a lot of crap in them, so I had a good time.
I had an excellent time as well.
No one's got anything to plug here, but check out the Soundtrack Your Life website if you guys want to listen to playlists related to the podcast. Since the Trainspotting album, I believe, is no longer purchasable anywhere or streamable. But thanks for listening. Leave a review, and we will see you in 2021.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.